welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun Cho. President Yoon Suk-yeol defied an arrest warrant against him on charges of insurrection. This is the first time an arrest warrant has been issued against a sitting president. As the political crisis heightens in South Korea, we discuss how that will impact Seoul's relations with the incoming Trump administration.
권한 없는 기관에서 청구한 영장이 발부됐다는 것이 놀랍고
내란 시대 윤석열을 즉각 체포하라!
하루라도 빨리 정치적 불확실성과 사회 갈등을 종식시켜 경제와 민생 위기 가능성 차단이 필요하다는
bring it back. It has to be brought back. People are not respecting our country very much, and they're going to respect us a lot.
In the studio with me, Ambassador Joseph DeTrani, former special envoy for the six-party talks during the Bush administration. Ambassador DeTrani also served as the director of National Counterproliferation Center and associate director of National Intelligence. Also joining us, Colonel David Maxwell, the vice president of the Center for Asia-Pacific Strategy. Colonel Maxwell was a former military planner for the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Ambassador DeTrani, after a 6-hour standoff, President Yoon defied an arrest warrant against him. Yoon's lawyer said the warrant is illegal, while the police will summon the head of the Secret Service for obstructing official duty. Now, how will the U.S. government view the latest developments in South Korea when the leader of an ally considered one of the best partners for cooperation until just before the martial law declaration, now facing danger of impeachment and arrest?
Well, I think the reaction from the U.S. government, I'm not with the government any longer, but I think the reaction was very sad and disappointed and surprised that this was happening. Martial law? I mean, it's a vibrant liberal democracy, and it's the president, Yoon Suk-yeol. And as you just said, we have such a great relationship with President Yoon. So a lot of surprise, but I emphasize disappointment. The effort to impose martial law was actually moved on, and that's powerful. I mean, this is obviously hopeful that this gets resolved, and this is a domestic issue. It's the rule of law. And I think people are watching it very closely in the U.S. government, but I think throughout the United States, because South Korea is such a close ally.
Mm-hmm. Colonel Maxwell, shortly after the martial law declaration, just as Ambassador DeTrani noted, U.S. government said President Yoon badly misjudged his decision and it was deeply problematic and illegitimate. Now, the opposition party, which pursues the arrest and impeachment of President Yoon, has a track record of anti-Japan, pro-China, and have suspicion about a few elements of U.S.-ROK relations, whereas President Yoon's ruling party prioritizes U.S.-ROK alliance, cooperation with Japan, and more aligned with U.S. policy. Doesn't that pose a dilemma to Washington?
Well, certainly from the U.S. perspective, but I would caution, first, I agree with what Ambassador DeTrani said. This is a rule of law issue, a domestic issue. But from our perspective, we have to deal with Korea as it really is and not as we would wish it would be. Right now, we are dealing with a caretaker administration that's taking it through this process. And then whatever party emerges after these proceedings take place, which could be as long as 6 months, for the impeachment for the court to rule, then we'll have to deal with the next government after a snap election if President Yoon is impeached. And in the past, we have had divergent views between the U.S. and Iraq, but we've always worked through them. And the alliance has continued to evolve for the last 7 decades. And I think what is important to note is that the vast majority of Korean people and the American people support the alliance, because we all know how important the alliance is to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and to the national security of both countries and the national prosperity of both countries. So while I think there are challenges ahead, but I think that we will work through them as we have in the past. And we should remember that this is a fight for democracy, different visions of democracy in South Korea, but the democratic processes are playing out despite the major strategic miscalculation of the imposition of martial law. We should remember that it was quickly overturned, and all agencies of the Korean government followed the ruling of the National Assembly, and that's a positive sign.
The U.S. government will deal with whichever government takes power in South Korea. However, how would the United States view the fact that Yoon and the ruling party's popularity is rising after the martial law declaration and after the impeachment, and that large crowds of people are going to the streets in support of course, there's anti-Yoon protests as well, but in support of Yoon?
Well, yes, I think, and again, we have to emphasize this is a domestic internal issue for South Korea, and we support the democratic process and allowing that process to play out. But the support for President Yoon, again, it really shows that the people are taking this very seriously, and they are looking at both sides of the issue. And there is division in South Korea between the conservatives and the progressives, and that process is playing out. I don't think the U.S. government is going to take sides. Nor do I think it should. And again, as you mentioned, we have to deal with the government, whichever government emerges, and do what is best in the mutual interests for both our countries.
Ambassador DeTrani, not about taking sides, but CRS report pointed out that President Yoon's suspension and possible removal from office raises questions about the staying power of his policies, and also that would significantly implicate United States as well. So it is not about taking sides, but about a government which aligned with U.S. policy and a party which has a track record of not aligning with U.S. policy. How would Washington view that?
Well, I think Washington would view it in a very pragmatic way. The U.S. and the Republic of Korea were close allies, and that alliance is strong. That alliance is very strong. So, to be brutally honest with you, again, because it is a domestic issue, it has to be resolved, and it will be resolved pursuant to the rule of law. But the alliance withstands any party. This is not we don't have an alliance with the PPP or with the Democratic Party. We have an alliance with the Republic of Korea. And that's the point. This is a strong alliance. And it should be, and be very clear, it should be, certainly for the American people, they're looking at it.
Colonel Maxwell, South Korea's opposition parties and progressives argue that if South Korea joins U.S. efforts against China, South Korea will become the front line of a new Cold War. There's also much stronger sense of opposition against the possible Trump administration's moves to raise South Korea's burden sharing. If Lee Jae-myung, the head of the Democratic Party, or any other opposition leader takes office, is there a chance that President Trump may reconsider how he values South Korea as an ally, given his focus on containing China, which started from the first Trump administration?
Well, I think there's, again, we have to be clear-eyed. We recognize South Korea is in a difficult neighborhood. The proverb, the shrimp among whales, applies. And Korea is a small country, compressed between large ones, Russia, China, the U.S., Japan. And so we have to recognize that South Korea needs to get along with all of its neighbors. And we've often accommodated that in the past. But I don't think, and I'm hoping that the Trump administration is going to accept the gift that the Biden administration is really providing it. And that is this strong silk web of alliances, of partnerships that are bilateral, multilateral, trilateral, minilateral, all of these relationships that have been developed. Regardless of how you view the foreign policy, those alliances and partnerships really give strength to the United States. And I'm hoping that the Trump administration will no longer need to conduct the alliance bashing that has been conducted as part of politics, part of U.S. domestic politics. And there is the recognition that we are stronger with our alliances. And so to that end, regardless of what happens politically in South Korea, I think the United States, for its own interests, needs to ensure our alliances remain strong. And Korea is important. Strategic location, strategic basing, again, support to the Indo-Pacific, free Indo-Pacific, as well as Korea has turned out to be a partner, a strong partner in the arsenal of democracy, providing military equipment that the atrophied U.S. defense base is no longer able to produce. And so in many aspects, Korea is a very important partner.
Ambassador DeTrani, President Trump's aide also said that America First can't be just achieved by the U.S. alone in Asia and cited South Korea's important role. How will the current political instability in South Korea affect the Trump administration's inclination to cooperate with South Korea?
No, I think cooperation would just continue. There's no question about that. I mean, mutual defense treaty, joint command, it's a strong alliance we have. We have over 28,500 troops in South Korea. We see what's going on in North Korea. We see the alliance of North Korea now with the Russian Federation and supporting Russia in its war of aggression in Ukraine, even with troops. So it's pretty obvious we have to not only continue this close alliance, regardless of the government. I mean, that's a domestic issue that's being worked out in the Republic of Korea. That will be worked out. But that of the alliance, the joint command, a mutual defense treaty, it's very clear. It's in regards to North Korea, but it's in regards to the region itself. And we're close allies, and we have a commitment there. So regardless of the government and what happens, this alliance will continue along similar lines.
Mm-hmm. Alliance will continue, but what about specific coordination between the two countries?
Well, coordination will absolutely, and it's not just leader to leader. It's not just, in this case, it would be President Trump with President Yoon or his successor. It's the inner workings of the organization. Departments of Defense.
During the first Trump administration, President Trump's personal preference towards world leaders really showed in diplomacy as well, towards Abe of Japan, towards Merkel of Germany. It impacted United States foreign policy towards those countries.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. It did influence it. It did influence it. But it did not affect the momentum. It did not affect the ultimate goal of these alliances. It did not affect the inner workings, the cooperation, the dialogue.
Colonel Maxwell, after the second Trump administration takes office on January 20th, do you think it'll push for the renegotiation of the special measures agreement, but also the reduction of U.S. forces in Korea, even though the Defense Authorization Act stipulates the minimum level of 28,500 troops in Korea?
So I hope that the Trump administration does not take on petty issues. And I consider a renegotiation of the SMA to be really a waste of the U.S. administration's time. A very fair agreement has been negotiated. And to go back on it now, it really is not helpful to the United States and not helpful to the alliance. I think that, again, a mature Trump administration coming into office is going to recognize the value of the alliance. And they have bigger fish to fry than a special measures agreement or the reduction of troops. And I think the reduction of troops, you have to ask for what purpose. Some would say to turn towards China. The forces in Korea, the U.S. forces in Korea, are optimized to support the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command, not for contingency. They have little value for contingencies in Taiwan. Other forces are more appropriately focused for other contingencies. And so I don't think that you're going to see a strong push that, for reduction of forces. That there will be a very domino effect of effects that will occur if they try to do that. Effects on basing in the United States, effect on basing throughout the region. And so these are problems that would be self-induced by the United States if we decided to withdraw troops or renegotiate the special measures agreement. It would just increase the friction, the tension, and not lead to a significant positive outcome. It is better to focus on sustaining the alliance with a clear-eyed view of what the threats are. And the threats come from North Korea, from Russia, from China, and our alliances are really necessary for the mutual defense of all.
If the second Trump administration pushes for the troop reduction and changes in the burden sharing, what could be the counter logic from Seoul?
Well, Seoul should demonstrate how valuable Korea is to the United States winning in strategic competition, to contributing as a member of the arsenal of democracy, the shortfalls in the American industrial base, the military industrial base that is unable to provide the military support to Ukraine, particularly in 155 millimeter artillery ammunition that Korea has been producing to backfill the stocks that the U.S. has been providing. Korea contributes in many ways as a global pivotal state, throughout the world to the benefit of the United States and the mutual benefit of both countries. And so Seoul needs to demonstrate that it contributes to the United States being able to be successful in strategic competition. And to put it in President Trump's words, to win. And that's what he wants to see. And South Korea will contribute to the U.S. winning in every aspect.
So if South Korea ceased to become that global pivotal state because of the political changes domestically, how would that undermine the mutual interest of South Korea and the United States?
Well, certainly that if it changes path, that it will there will be divergence of policies. However, as Ambassador DeTrani said, from a military perspective, I expect that the alliance will continue and that the U.S. is committed and South Korea is committed to the mutual defense of both countries, particularly against North Korea, although the Mutual Defense Treaty is broad and doesn't specifically state North Korea. It is against threats to both countries throughout the Asia-Pacific region. And I think that both countries will remain committed to that. And there could be differing views in how to achieve that. And again, those are going to be worked through by the professionals, by the diplomats, and yes, eventually face-to-face between the presidents of both countries.
Ambassador DeTrani, you're a former special envoy to the six-party talks. There are concerns about Korea passing if President Trump engages in direct diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. From the U.S. perspective, has North Korea's strategy of 통미봉남, engaging with the United States, shutting off South Korea, has ever been realized? And for the United States, is it possible to exclude South Korea and reach an agreement with North Korea? Would that be in U.S. interest?
It is not. That would not be in the U.S. interest. It would not be. It would be in North Korea's interest, but it's certainly not in U.S. interest. Certainly, the Republic of Korea's interest, Japan's interest, and the broader region. Maybe in China's interest, yes.
Has there been instances where it has happened before?
No, it has not. From my personal experience, and as you correctly mentioned, I was the special envoy for negotiations, and that was with the six-party talks, and that was 3 years. But I followed it ever since then, very closely with the DNI and other positions. We've never had Korea passing.
During President Bush, when he called North Korea axis of evil, he didn't consult with South Korea. During Trump-Kim diplomacy, Moon Jae-in government was excluded in many ways.
Well, that doesn't mean the President of the United States has to clear and get permission, approval from other heads of states. He has a broad mandate. And that broad mandate, and he was talking about axis of evil. And he was basically looking at human rights issues. He was looking at the military buildup and so forth. But that doesn't mean there was Korea passing. That doesn't mean when we get into negotiations with North Korea, we're just going to do it bilaterally. And it would not be in the U.S. interest. It would certainly not be in the Republic of Korea's interest to do that.
Colonel Maxwell, with the current political turmoil in South Korea, make it more difficult for Trump administration to closely coordinate with South Korea on North Korea policy, especially the high-level summit diplomacy with North Korea. Would that lead to unfavorable results for Seoul?
Well, it could. I agree with what Ambassador DeTrani said, but what I think is important, given the turmoil in South Korea, but an understanding of what's happening in North Korea, and I think we are overlooking that. The internal issues that are taking place in North Korea and what has happened over the last year with declaring South Korea the main enemy, with removing peaceful unification as a policy by North Korea. All of this is a result of what's happening internally in North Korea. And what I would like to see happen is with the incoming Trump administration and either the Yoon government or the successive government is an examination of our strategic assumptions. And this is where I think I differ with Ambassador DeTrani somewhat. The strategic assumption I would make is that North Korea is not going to negotiate complete denuclearization as long as the Kim family regime remains in power. And I think that that needs to be the basic strategic assumption to develop new policies. And I say that because in President Trump's first term, he did something no other president has done. He gave it a shot. He gave the opportunity to Kim Jong-un to change, and Kim Jong-un didn't accept it. And those the summitry fell through because Kim Jong-un could not give up his nuclear weapons in the way that was demanded by President Trump. And so I think a new policy needs to be in line. And Kim Jong-un's internal stresses, how he is dealing with Russia, really warrant a relook at policy and strategy. And as counterintuitive it is, and pundits will ban this, but the 815 unification doctrine really provides a way forward. And while President Yoon has been impeached, the 815 unification doctrine has not been impeached. And I would say that for President Trump, should look seriously at adopting elements of that. Human rights up front, a strong information component, and helping the Korean people in the North to create change. If we want to see Kim Jong-un change his behavior, it's going to have to come from within North Korea. And that really can happen by the North Korean people, the Korean people in the North, having their human right of self-determination of government. The pursuit of a free and unified Korea.
So let me comment on some of this. And I don't disagree. Human rights up front, certainly strong deterrence. We're looking at what North Korea is doing with their constitution, making South Korea and the United States the principal enemies. But denuclearization, I think we need to keep that piece in play. Denuclearization. We may never achieve denuclearization. But if the ultimate goal is complete and verifiable denuclearization, because we do not want a nuclear arms race in the region. South Korea, over 70% of the people want to have their own nuclear weapons. Japan will go in that direction. We're talking about even possible fissile material to terrorist organizations and so forth. And we know Al-Qaeda was looking at it. So if we can keep denuclearization on the table, we may never achieve it. But we start moving towards some of the issues that North Korea really wants, and that's lifting of sanctions, some sanctions relief. And that was the Hanoi conference with President Donald Trump.
Let me say, denuclearization,
relief.
I agree, denuclearization is important. The path to denuclearization is through unification.
That's fine. But I think that needs to still be on the table,
Yes.
David, and that's my only point.
I agree.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up our discussion for this week. Colonel Maxwell, Ambassador DeTrani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back here next week with U.S. experts to discuss the two Koreas and the region right here from Washington.